The Pistis of Sophia. Do you know that book? It's one that I don't have on my shelf. I had to go study it. I was asked to do a video on describing that one, how that one works. It's a Gnostic book, but I want to talk about some things. It looks a little dubious to me. However, it's still holding certain lessons, but there's something about it that's just not quite right. My name is Dan Paulson. Welcome to the video. Real quickly here, what was it? When are you going to make a video for the Pistis of Sophia? Okay, first I want to say that what I'm about to talk about here comes from deep study. There's just a lot of knowledge from antiquity it's been lost. They lived a different life than we live. You really have to put yourself into this. In the same way that we are involved in our media, they were involved in these stories. So they knew things at a very deep level that we've lost. We don't know what's going on anymore. There's something in common with these stories. When we see repeats of virgin births, Jesus wasn't the first one. When we see flood stories, the Jews were not the first ones. These flood stories have been happening, and they happen in different cultures. The destruction of the world and having to start over again, everything from Plato and Atlantis to God having to create the earth over again in Genesis. All of these are repeating motifs, and we're going to find that same thing happening in later versions. They're all built on a certain pattern that is recognizable. The source of them is interesting. What I want to talk about with this one here, first of all, is that I have the Nag Hammadi scriptures. This is the entire collection of what was found, the Gnostic material at Nag Hammadi. The Pistis of Sophia is not included in here. It is not a book that was included with that. If I go through my apocryphal works, not just from Edward Goodspeed, I've got quite a few of them up there, even some from Bart Ehrman. There is no Pistis of Sophia, and I don't have one on my shelf. I had to go look at some things, and I found some fun stuff in here that we need to look at. There's going to be some more common motifs. First of all, what I want to do is talk about this. Let's talk about the source, the origins of the Pistis of Sophia. Where does it come from? If it wasn't with the Nag Hammadi library, where did it come from? All right, I want to point out a few anomalous things here. The Nag Hammadi library was discovered in December of 1945, so it's been fairly recent that the Nag Hammadi was discovered, and the Pistos or the Pistis of Sophia is not included in there. The Pistis Sophia is a Gnostic text discovered in 1773, so it was not discovered with the Nag Hammadi find in Egypt, possibly written between the 3rd and 4th centuries after death. The existing manuscript, which some scholars place in the late 4th centuries, relates one Gnostic group's teachings of the transfigured Jesus to the assembled disciples, including his mother Mary, Mary Magdalene, and Martha. In this context, transfigured refers to Jesus after his death and resurrection, not the event during his life, where he spoke to appearances of Moses and Elijah on a mountain. In this text, the risen Jesus has spent 11 years speaking with his disciples, teaching them only the lower mysteries. After 11 years, he receives his true garment and is able to reveal the higher mysteries revered by this group. The prized mysteries relate to complex cosmologies and knowledge necessary for the soul to reach the highest divine realms. Much of the first 2 books of the manuscript are dedicated to outlining the myth of the fall and restoration of the figure known as Pistis Sophia, in particular giving detailed parallels between her prayer of repentance and particular psalms and odes of Solomon. We're going to know that as the Song of Solomon. Okay, what did we read up here? Right here where we have the risen Jesus had spent 11 years speaking with his disciples, teaching them only the lower mysteries. After 11 years. What's strange is if you go to the book of Luke, you're going to find out that it was about the age of 12 that he was in the temple. There's something going on there. He disappears completely. He comes back at the age of about 30. Anyway, okay, we're going to go on here. Let's find out where this came from. The Askew Codex. Pistis Sophia, this actual document right here, has been preserved in a single Coptic language manuscript, originally comprising 178 leaves of parchment, but currently consisting of 174 leaves. Wow, what happened to the other 4? This Askew Codex was purchased by the British Museum, now the British Library, in 1785 from a collector, Anthony Askew. So that's the source so far, what we've got from this document. The Greek title Pistis Sophia was assigned by Carl Gottfried Voigt, placed on a title at the beginning of Book 2, the second book of the Pistis Sophia, which was added by a later hand. Carl Schmidt suggests Book of the Savior, based on a title found at the end of the same book. This expression, Pistis Sophia, is obscure, and its English translation varied. The wisdom of faith, faith-wisdom, wisdom in faith, or faith in wisdom. So that's what Pistis Sophia means, faith and wisdom. To some later Gnostics, Sophia was a divine, I don't know what that is, syzygy of Christ, rather than simply a word meaning wisdom, and this context suggests the interpretation, the faith of Sophia, or the loyalty of Sophia. Both the Berlin Codex and the Papyrus Codex at Nag Hammadi have an earlier, simpler Sophia, where a transfigured Christ explains Pistis obscurely. Okay, that means it's going to be like, I haven't read them all, but it's going to be like Matthew, Mark, and Luke. They're all the same story, told by three different authors, and they're all got variations to them. And the Pistis of Sophia, it sounds like depending on which version you read, there's going to be variations to it. Same as the Voyage of the Argo. Depending on which author wrote it, there's going to be variations to it. So, you know what? It really doesn't offer an origination beyond this right here. It got into the hands of a collector, Anthony Askew, who then made it available, sold it to the British Museum, now the British Library, in 1785. Okay, so that in and of itself doesn't mean anything. There's times where you find material where there are claims being made to it. It has an antiquity sound to it, but that it really can't be traced. I've got a few other examples of that same tactic from that kind of the same era in life where they're focusing on stories. It's pre-electricity, pre all of the technology that we have. The Emerald Tablets of Thoth. If you were to study this, you're going to find out that the Emerald Tablets were supposedly taken from the god Thoth from Atlantis before it sank to the bottom of the sea. He went to Egypt and he taught there, but the tablets were hidden there, presumably under the pyramid or under the Sphinx, and that they disappeared from there for some reason, and they reappeared underneath a pyramid in South America where they were observed by somebody, and they copied them, what was there on the Emerald Tablets. But the Emerald Tablets have now disappeared, and there's no way to trace them or anything like that. So you got this story that this material supposedly comes from Atlantis, and it's coming through this god, Thoth, who was an Egyptian god, but then, that whole story goes through there, but you can't trace the source. In fact, what's funny is you can see rendition of that very story in the DVD, the beginning of the DVD, The Secret by Rhonda Byrne. It flashes on all these images as things are happening in the beginning, but there's just this 1 second shot or something like that, or maybe 2 seconds, that shows somebody that they're in period garments, very old, like in robes or something, in a stone structure. It looks like they're inside of a pyramid or something with lanterns illuminating things, and they're copying those stones right there. So, yeah, it's made it into culture as something that supposedly is there. The secret, where does it come from? We've got the same thing with, let me grab it. Here it is, the Kolbrin Library. The Kolbrin Library is one that fits kind of that same category. And it's following the same pattern, but it looks like it's from modernity, although they try to make it sound older than it really is. This was something supposedly that was found in England on some kind of metal plates. The entire writing was preserved in metal plates, and it was copied and transcribed and became the Kolbrin Bible, but since then the metal plates have disappeared and are no longer available to inspect. What do we have with the Book of Mormon? Joseph Smith finds the book in these magic decoder goggles in the desert and is able to decode this ancient weird stuff and come up with the Mormon Bible, which sounds strangely like Old English, doesn't it? God must have spoken Old English. Anyway, and of course the goggles and all that stuff are gone. They're no longer available. So there's this way of trying to develop into the story a link to antiquity that is no longer there. Now, when we get into I don't have a copy of it. When we get into the Pistis of Sophia, it doesn't make claims like that. In fact, it is even older than the Nag Hammadi itself. Boy, on editing, I caught that. That's very wrong. It isn't older than the Nag Hammadi. We don't know the ages of the two. However, presumably, because of the nature of the material, Pistis of Sophia came about as a result of Gnosticism developing. Sophia is mentioned in the Gnostic Bible, even though the Pistis of Sophia isn't in there. So there is a link of they're both looking to be from the same antiquity. What I meant to say there is that that we've had the Pistis of Sophia in our hands much longer than we've had the Nag Hammadi in our hands, even though they're both. I would say the original Nag Hammadi and the Jesus material, Gospel of Thomas, Gospel of Philip, and the Greek material are going to be older than the Gnostic material. And the Pistis of Sophia will be probably some of the most recent. But it's all being manufactured at a time by people who have a different idea, that are wanting to teach this with their own style and are coming up with their own things, and they're blending things a little more in the open. But that's okay. It could have existed during the time the Nag Hammadi was well known, and Gnostic material was well known. It got hidden, it got buried. The church tried to get rid of all of that stuff. They tried to hide it and make sure that religion, Christianity, was fixed in one way. They did not want you to understand the inner pathway. They only wanted you to understand the outer pathway, that you look outward to God. When the reality of it is you're supposed to enter the narrow gate, you turn inward. This is very important to understand. Population is growing, getting big. We need control. Looking outward and believing in it the way that the church teaches, that nested material. It's fear-based and it's population controlling. If you turn inward and find the inner path, it is instantly, personally self-freeing. You escape that. You cease to be a follower. The church wants followers. They don't want people that are free. However, they've left in the instructions, or they've left in the pathway, just no instructions at all. You have to know what you're doing when you're reading the Bible. But if you treat it like you're treating Greek myth, bingo. That's all the magic you need, just how to read the myth. That having been said, I want to point out something else. I want to pull up, if I can here. All right, this is the Pistis of Sophia here, and the third book, chapter 102. I want to jump down here to something that I want to read. Say unto them, renounce belly love, that you may be worthy of the mysteries of the light and be saved from the judgments of Amenti. Say unto them, renounce babbling, that you may be worthy of the mysteries of the light and be saved from the fires of Amenti. Say unto them, renounce craftiness, that you may be worthy of the mysteries of the light and be saved from the chastisements which are in Amenti. Amenti is the word I'm focusing in on. Let me find a couple more examples here. Okay, here we go. The state of the sinful soul after death. Oh, this is good. And after 3 days, the retributive receivers lead down that soul to the Amenti of the chaos. And when they bring it down to the chaos, they hand it over to those who chastise. What did it say? Receivers lead down the soul to the Amenti of the chaos. All right, any flow variations are due to me filming this over a couple of days, several days. All right, as they're talking about Amenti here and there being like a destructive place, as we move ahead here, we're going to see Amenti being used in Egyptian material, the halls of Amenti. Understand this, that it is their version of saying the garden, the space within, you are mine, the halls of Amenti. That's what's up in here. And if there's conflict in the halls of Amenti, what is that? That's a troubled mind right there. Understand that that's what's happening right here, that there's a difficulty there. Now later we're going to see Thoth go into the halls of Amenti, pass into the halls of Amenti, but that's still the mind space, but it's a purified mind space. He's crossing a threshold there. So let's move on. Okay, further mention of Amenti down here in chapter 127, towards the end of it, on the severity of the chastisements of the dragon. Mary answered and said, Woe unto the souls of sinners! Now therefore, my Lord, is the fire in the world of mankind fiercer, or in the fire of Amenti? And the Savior answered and said to Mary, Amen, I say to you, the fire in Amenti is 9 times fiercer than the fire in mankind. I want to stop and describe a mental process that's being nested in this story right here. The turmoil in your mind is going to be much worse than the turmoil from life experiences. If I have been molested, that happened to me, that was a part of my experience, so I can fit into this. I was ashamed of that for years. I was young when it happened, but I was made and conditioned and had, thought processes in place that caused me to feel shame. I wouldn't tell anybody that. And if I thought about it, I would have my palms would sweat. I would get a physiological response to it. Up here was worse. What I finally healed, what I did is I talked to a friend of mine and told them what happened, and they were like, what? So that's it? Yeah, that happens to probably just about almost everybody, And it was like, oh my God, all that turmoil. Where did it come from? From man or from the halls of Amenti, or from the Amenti, from the mind? That's what they're doing right here. You're going to tear yourself up worse than just understand that it's hard to get over that threshold, but they're teaching you. You're doing your own damage. In fact, if you take a moment to just reason that through, in my example right here at this moment, you'll see that this is a true statement. Think of something in your own mind that you don't want to tell anybody. Now, think of what I just did right here, that I am in a position where I have been molested, and I'm never going to tell anybody because it is so horrific. You listen to the story and you're like, man, dude, it's okay. That's all right. See how you treat me compared to how I felt about it. Now, put yourself in my shoes. Just flip it. And understand that this is teaching right here, that you're going to do yourself a lot more damage than just freely talking it out with people. We're afraid. It's hard to cross that threshold. Yeah, that's why few make it. If we were to go to the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, I'm going to start right off here and begin reading in the beginning. I, Thoth, the Atlantean, master of the mysteries, keeper of records, mighty king, magician, living from generation to generation, being about to pass into the halls of Amenti. Remembering now, if you read these stories and you get into the story and you play the story out and make the story yours, you become that person. You become Thoth. You become Jesus. You become Moses. You become Marduk. You become Abraham. Oh, it goes on and on. So you become this person right here. But that's metaphorical. You're getting ready to play this out in your mind. You're pretending like you're this character as you're going through this adventure. And the adventure is what? To defeat the enemy within. But you got to cross a threshold. You got to turn inward. You got to look inward. That's the halls of Amenti. In this material. In other material, it is so many other things. It is the world that needs to be destroyed or made pure again. It is your space. It is the garden that you need to get, or the vineyard that belongs to you, that you need to get it back, and you can't have it back. It's the land or the kingdom that belongs to you. It is Sodom and Gomorrah when it's early on and it needs to be destroyed. All of those represent something that is a part of us, that is all holding that same thing. So the halls of Amenti is the brain space, but the halls that's wide open. It holds good and it holds bad. So as we go through here, it's going to be kind of like, is Amenti good or bad? Amenti is like if you were to utilize garden instead of Amenti and say, well, in Amenti we have good and bad things. It stores all. We can say in the garden it grows thistles and it grows figs. It grows good and it goes bad. Both of them are representing metaphorically the idea that this is the mind up here, and that our experiences that we've judged and left unresolved, both good and bad. Good ones are okay. It's unresolved. I don't need to resolve it. If I feel happy about something I keep getting triggered on, that's okay. It's the stuff that brings us off course. The thistles in the garden, the negative that's in the halls of Amenti, the 9 times worse right here. It's a personal experience. We're going to tear ourselves up if you got that kind of brain. If you don't, you won't give a shit. I, Thoth, the Atlantean, master of the mysteries, keeper of records, mighty king, magician, living from generation to generation, being about to pass into the halls of Amenti. You would translate that like this. You put yourself into the story. I, Thoth, am about to pass into the halls of Amenti. I, Dan, am about ready to turn into my mind. I'm about to take this adventure right here, right at the beginning of the story. Set down for the guidance of those that are to come after, those records of the mighty wisdom of great Atlantis. Where does Amenti come from? So Amenti from the Pistis of Sophia is Egyptian, and its source is dubious, as in the same way that the Emerald Tablets of Thoth is as well. So you can see parallels beginning to emerge on a deeper level than just, say, maybe sharing a flood motif or something like that. That there are other things that you begin to look at and realize there's similarities there. Let's find some more of those. And I know I'm not really covering the material yet. I'm just looking at some things and pointing out some stuff that I see. This doesn't mean that it's phony material. What this means is that it's written by somebody to contain that template, that is a teaching template, and they're trying to make it sound like it's not them, like it comes from some official source. We're looking for what the material is. We don't care about the authenticity of the authorship. Not at all. If the material is viable, the material is viable. And let me try to do a better job explaining that. This wonderful little book, the Tao Te Ching, is one of the world's most popular books. It's very small, and it comes from somebody called Lao Tzu, whose name translates to the master, or the great master, something to that effect. It's not known whether Lao Tzu actually existed, but there's a body of work that exists, and right here is a body of work that exists. We don't care whether Lao Tzu existed or not. We follow the body of work. There's a teaching. This isn't Christianity. We don't follow a master. We listen to a master. Buddha, same thing. Dhammapada, pivotal teaching. And if you interpret both of these, you're going to find out it's the same teaching. It's like there's the same person. It's the same teaching. Did the person exist or not? It doesn't matter. It's about a body of work. We're going to treat all of this, every bit of it, the exact same way. It's difficult to extract ourselves from it emotionally, but we have to. There's something in here for the person that can figure it out, that can get past the outer carrier shell. It exists, it doesn't exist, the anger, the fighting, all of that. There's something important in there. It's just hard to find. It's a puzzle. All right, we've got one here, the fourth book, chapter 126, and Mary continued again and said to Jesus, "And what type is the outer darkness, or rather, how many regions of chastisement are there in it?" Okay, Jesus is going to teach of the dragon of the outer darkness. And Jesus answered and said to Mary, "The outer darkness is a great dragon whose tail is in his mouth, outside the whole world and surrounding the whole world. And there are many regions of chastisement within it. There are 12 mighty chastisement dungeons, and a ruler is in every dungeon, and the face of the rulers is different from one another." Okay, do we recognize the symbology there? Again, this is Egyptian symbology, the snake eating its tail, the consumption of itself. He calls it a dragon, but it's doing the same thing, eating its tail. It symbolizes death and rebirth. It also symbolizes cycles, that there are cycles that happen and that we get consumed by our own cycles. So there's a number of ways to read these that look at it this way. You can get triggered over things and they're happy things. I smell something that reminds me of Grandma's apple pie. I smell something that reminds me of Christmas time. Happy times or something like that, you're getting triggered. Those are cycles that are built into us. There's other times you get pissed off and pound holes in the wall. Or you get angry, or you get frustrated, or you sit in just your own funk, your own stupor, your own depression, feeling bad and feeling worthless and feeling... those are cycles as well. That in all life, we're living through cycles. What are those cycles? That's getting advanced into the interpretation, but right now, what we're looking at is a few things that are pointing towards this Judeo-Christian blend mixing with Egyptian material. So, to me, I explain that logically as somebody is very knowledgeable. They know a lot of things, and they're blending knowledge, and they're trying to create their own version that has its own flavor, has its own style, and can have its own impact on a population. It can when you read through things like this, they're really a lot different than what you're going to find in the New Testament, for example. They sound radically different. They still don't make sense. They're still cryptic, but they're cryptic in a different way. They're cryptic in a way that is more comfortable to interpret as an inward path, as something that is more Buddha-like or Tao-like, as opposed to more Christian, just worship and, idol worship this God looking outward someplace and just wait till you die. That'll keep you shut up. Meanwhile, the way to take that path is encoded in the New Testament, but it's really hard to see. Where if you get into something like into the Nag Hammadi, it becomes simpler. When you're supposed to take the path yourself, it is you who are supposed to do it. We learned that it's different. So there's different styles, and I'm going to still say that they're all viable. Something that's important for you to understand on your own, but I'm going to tell you right now in the way Judeo-Christian material works. It's very rare that you're going to find the woman telling the story. When you do, it's important to understand that there is a psychological hierarchy that is being used to hide the concepts in the stories. If we go to Genesis, Adam and Eve and God, what we have is three components of the human being. It's going to be known later as Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. But what it really is the higher awareness. That's when you sit back and go, I'm okay. I have a life and I have experiences, but outside those experiences, I'm this person that wonders what the hell life is about. Okay, that is your conscious interacting with your higher awareness. That is your conscious living through that detached, I'm not my memories. I know this gets drawn out sometimes, but you have to be able to interact with this. So you would pay attention to things like those when you're waking up at 3 to 4 in the morning and that mental process is going on in your mind where you're tossing and turning and you're recognizing a third part that comes in from time to time and tries to get you to just shut down. Hey, there's nothing you can do tonight. Let it go. And if you stop and pay attention to that and engage with that voice right there in your consciousness and not just don't allow yourself to just slip back into the memory. Stop and engage with that right there. As long as you can engage with it, you will notice that you're not feeling the emotion of the memories. You're outside of those memories right there. The memories are what the problems are. The unresolved memories or the unresolved issues or the things that are hanging in delegation. It's all of the stuff that we're bringing with us that we somehow maintain upstairs in a conflict. That's the mote in the eye. That's the ought against our brother. When we become poor in spirit, it is to become devoid of those judgments. Those are normal things. We grow up and live through those. The objective then is to become aware of that and go, oh, this is what happened. I must now rise above it. I must now leave these memories behind, disconnecting from them psychologically so that they no longer have the same emotional impact, and then they cease to cycle around and act out in the way that they do. The teaching is going to be psychological, but it's going to dictate your flow in life that's going to feel spiritual. The cryptic Jesus teaching that covers that is that if you come to the altar to leave your gift, and while you're there you remember you have ought against your brother, set your gift down, don't give it. Go resolve the ought against your brother, then come back and give your gift, and your Father who sees in secret rewards you in secret. Sounds like a strange thing. People, do they do that? When we think it through as a psychological teaching and that it's nesting something at a deeper level, we have to put ourselves, we interpret it the same way as everything else. Why are we going to the altar to leave a gift? You have to have these thought processes that go in. Why am I doing that? If you're leaving a gift at the altar, it's because you want a better life. So while you're looking for a better life, you remember you got a bunch of baggage upstairs, these judgments and these things that you've got stored away. Those are what's causing your life to act out. If you want a better life, go resolve that stuff and then come back and give your gift. Ask for a better life. Your Father who sees in secret rewards in secret. Your life automatically becomes better by just resolving the crap. It just changes. Here, I want to show you that exact same teaching right in the beginning of the Tao Te Ching. We've talked about that. This is the Stephen Mitchell translation. Here's one where we don't care about the teacher. We only care about the teaching. We don't care if Lao Tzu actually existed. Look at Free from desire, you realize the mystery. Caught in desire, you see only the manifestations. What does this mean? This is a psychological process. As long as you're caught into things that you have not resolved, you seek their continuation. You see the manifestations of them. Free from them, however, you realize the mystery. When you let go of those things, you realize the mystery of life. This is teaching us how we're coming on board. Okay, free from desire, you realize the mystery. Resolve the odd against your brother, then come and leave your gift, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you in secret. Caught in desire, you see only the manifestations. As long as you have that odd against your brother, stop leaving your gift at the altar and looking for a better life. You're going to continue to see the manifestations. Do you see the psychological teaching right there? Once you work it through your brain. You have to work the analogs through until they make some kind of psychological sense and become interactive. Bingo. We got one teaching from antiquity. I'm not my memories. When we're little, that's how we live. As we begin to live through life, we begin to live through our memories and our judgments. We become products of those, and we cease to live through the higher awareness, and we begin to live through our memories. All right, so knowing the Bible is going to be helpful when we see this happening. In the beginning in Genesis, Genesis is the birth of each human. That creation story right there, that's us being born and coming on board. And it starts out conscious and God, Adam and God working together. As we learn, we're living through our higher self. We don't have an inner being. We don't have memories. We don't have an inner self yet. We don't have what's going to become called Eve. The reason they're using a mental hierarchy there is because that's life. You look around in life, the men are in charge of the women. It's a patriarchal society. So we're going to make the story that way. It makes sense. The man is in charge of the woman. What they're really saying is the consciousness is in charge of the bundle of memories. The way that the bundle of memories are have been dictated by the judgment of the man. The female getting tempted is really, think about that. Does your inner self get tempted by something, or does your consciousness give in and say, I'm going to go ahead and do that anyway? Okay, so when the sin is happening, sin is not us doing something bad. Sin is us having something happen that is going to be unresolved, that is going to affect us in a derogatory manner. That's why all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. What that really means is all have judged something, and you're not happy anymore. You're not living through your higher awareness. You're now living through the cyclical pain of that memory that comes and goes. All right, but what happens is that Eve comes about, and at first there's purity. We become self-aware children. We are now little kids that have not judged life in a bad way. However, what happens is the serpent comes along, and that represents the life judgment. And what happens is that Eve gives in, and as a result, both the male and the female, Adam and Eve, are kicked out of the Garden of Eden, which really means your conscious and your subconscious are no longer happy anymore. You're no longer in that happy state. This is a life experience. We ate from the wrong tree, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. I stole something. I feel guilty. I got raped. I feel like a victim. I had all these things happen as time goes by, and left unresolved and left judged in the way that they are, we live through that mass of memories. That's the odd against our brother. That is the mote in the eye. That's what happens when you're not poor in spirit. You're full of that stuff right there. Okay, I'm not getting off subject. I'm going all over the place because it's one story from antiquity that fits all. However, so now as we get into here with Sophia. Sophia is what? A female that starts out that goes bad and has to become healed. This represents ourself living life, having experiences, judging that, learning later, and having to go on an inward path to resolve our issues. With Jesus being the resurrected self, that's the part of us that goes, okay, I'm going to stop living through those judgments. I have to be in charge of this. Your consciousness and your higher awareness linked together become the Jesus. It's now I know what to do. Now I'm going to heal. Now I'm going to resolve these things. I'm going to resolve these issues. So anytime we see something like a female in the story, the female represents the inner being, the subconscious, the mass of memories, the bundle of memories that we're living through is always the female. Eve is that with Adam, the inner self and the consciousness. Everybody's conscious is Adam. Everybody's inner self is Eve. Doesn't matter who you are. When we get here, everybody's consciousness, if you're on the path and you're healing, is Jesus, and everybody the resurrected Jesus, and the Pistis of Sophia is your inner self going through the healing process. Those are always going to be what the case is. All right, I'm going to throw another layer out, but this layer gives us some confirmation of what the resurrected Jesus is. Jesus is a monomyth, and crossing the first threshold happens when he is baptized by John. That's crossing a threshold. And what does he do? Belly of the whale. This is metaphorical, but what we had actually is Jesus going into the wilderness for 40 days to fast and pray. If we were to look at the story of Exodus, we'd see them crossing the Red Sea and then spending 40 years in the desert. So we see repeating motifs. This represents going into the mind, and then road of trials, the temptation, all of that is resolving the internal issues. Until we get here to what do we have? Crossing the return threshold. So in the Jesus story, this would be the crucifixion and resurrection. Think about what this resurrection would actually mean to an individual on the path, is that you've resolved something and now you've emerged now free from it. You have died to your old self and are born new to your purified new self. And do you see down here where we've got meeting with the goddess? In the story, that's where we're going to meet up with Sophia. Right there, the resurrection. You are now arisen in such a way that you are the master of both inner and outer world, and you have freedom to live. We look at it in Christianity as a literal resurrection, but if you understood the way the mythical stories work, this represents the idea that you have resolved what's in your mind. Now you come back out to life and go, whew, okay, now I can live myself. Freedom to live, freedom from that cyclical issue that I had that came from life experiences that I had maintained with bad judgment or some sort of derogatory judgment that was causing me to continue to resolve. So right here, when we're talking about the resurrected Jesus, that's it right here. This is, I've resolved all of my issues. Now let's go ahead and work with the inner being. It's just a way of healing this, of carrying the story. Quite frankly, if the consciousness is healed, the inner self is already healed. But this is teaching a process. We have to become the master of our own lives, our own version of the master of our lives. Okay, let's get back to the Pistis of Sophia now. I hope I've set up enough. If you're going to read this and really get the most benefit of it, your conscious needs to be Jesus. God needs to be the higher awareness, or Jesus, if God isn't here, then the risen Jesus is the higher awareness, and Sophia is your inner self. And that's how you must play out the story in the theater of your mind. It starts out, it came to pass when Jesus had risen from the dead, that he passed 11 years discoursing with his disciples and instructing them up only to the regions of the first commandment. All right, so what we're going to have is some different verbiage in here. There's first and second commandments. There's a variety of regions, actually. We're going to see that 11 years, though I want to point that out. That's going to be something that is derived back in Genesis. That's going to be part of a numbering pattern that we see in Judeo-Christian material. But let's move on and point out some things that are a little more common. What we're going to go through here first is that Jesus said to his disciples, I am come forth out of the first mystery, which is the last mystery. That is the 4th and 20th mystery. Okay, I'm come forth out of the first mystery, which is the last mystery. The first mystery is how you came about and how you were living through your higher awareness before living through your memories. And then after the resurrection, the last mystery, that is going back to, it's returning to that pure place. That is the 4 and 20th mystery. This is going to mean 20 and 4. Those are two different numbers. That's not one. This is a number. This is a numbering pattern that we'll look at a little bit. It'll get in greater depth. Let's be careful with it. And his disciples have not known nor understood that anything existed within that mystery, but they thought of that mystery, that it is the head of the universe and the head of all existence, and they thought it is the completion of all completions. That's the universe. That's where we come from. It is the head, is the source of all. Because it's like Buddhism. We come from and return to the universe. Okay, this does not sound Christian at all, does it? because Jesus had said to them concerning that mystery that it surroundeth the first commandment and the 5 impressions and the great light and the 5 helpers and the whole treasury of the light. Okay, it's going to start building a huge story, and you know what? This book is big. All right, Benny, this is like my 4th day working on this video. It's big. It's a big thing. All right, so it has a lot of really weird sounding stuff to it, which makes you really step back and go, okay, yeah, this is some weird stuff. Take a look at something right here, for example, chapter 21. What we have here is, and it came to pass when Jesus had finished saying these words that Mary continued again and said, My Lord, will not then the horoscope casters and consulters from now on declare unto men what will come to pass for them? And Jesus answered and said unto Mary, If the horoscope casters find the fate and the sphere turned towards the left according to their first extension, blah, blah. It goes on like that. You know what? We don't know what that means. What we do know is this, that Jesus is a character that is like Buddha or Lao Tzu, that he's a made-up character that is supposed to fit some sort of criteria for the population, and that here we see him dressed up in quite a bit different robes than what you would see in Christianity. He sounds a lot different. He sounds more mystical. People might look at that and say, okay, you know what? Jesus wasn't that Christian person. He was this mystic over here instead. Let's do the mystical thing. And you know what? Those are both carrier stories. Neither one of those are the real deal. The real deal is that there's something nested at a deeper layer in there that is cryptic, that is a personal inward trip, and in all cases, no matter what. So that's what becomes very difficult. You look at Jesus from the Bible and you look at Jesus here and go, those are not the same character. Oddly enough, they're teaching the same thing with different analogous verbiage. Jesus isn't real. The teaching is real. All right, I want to point out something I see here that's a kind of a unique difference in this story, and I don't know if it's unique. There's a lot of stories out there that I haven't read. But what I see here, typically there's going to be a conscious, a subconscious, and a higher awareness, a God. Those 3 elements are there. And what you see right here is 2 females. Mary is talking to Jesus. Mary's not external. Mary's internal. Sophia is internal. That's 2 females we have inside of us then, if you're playing it out there. Mary, when you're creating these stories and you're reading through Jesus stuff, you'll see Jesus, in order to speak, people have to ask him questions. So this is a teaching method. Somebody, a fictitious person asks a question, and the answer right there is the teaching. So Jesus isn't just sitting there blurting out things. He's having what appears to be a conversation with somebody, but the conversation is loaded in such a way that whatever Jesus says is what needs to be said. That's the pathway right there. So Mary is acting as this inner part of us that is pure. This is our inner self, Jesus and Mary together. Adam and Eve together. Abram and Sarai together, like that, the conscious and the subconscious together. However, there are bad parts of us, and that bad part of us would be called Sophia. So Sophia is a part of us that needs to be healed by the part of us that knows better, the Mary and the Jesus. It's very weird. Remember playing it out in your mind. You are searching for these issues that you have that cause the conflict in your life. So that is Jesus and Mary seeking Sophia, and then finding Sophia is corrupted and trying to heal Sophia, the inner self. That's the way this story's going to work. All right, it gets really thick at this point in time right here, but if we wanted to see the common motifs, we would have Adam and Eve, and then what happens, the corruption of Eve happens, and she gives pain in childbirth as a result. We have a cyclical pain element coming from the inner being as a result until the world is destroyed and things start over again. When we get to Abram and Sarai, we're going to find out that the corruption happens because Sarai marries Pharaoh, and as a result, you must be having some sort of a union outside of your own experience, and you pick up animals and servants along the way. Metaphorically, you're now no longer your pure self. You're now come loaded with things, the things that control you, the things that guide you, your memories. And what happens as a result, plagues come. So you've got your cyclical pain right there. And then right here, what we're going to have is the idea that instead of instead of the offspring being corrupted, what we have is a part of us, Sophia, that is corrupted. It's still an inner part of a female portion of us that is corrupted. You see how they work together, but they're so thick that if you don't interpret them, you really don't know to put them together like that. You don't understand that they're common motifs. It took me a long time to read them, to work through them and to play them out in my head. That idea that the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao, that's it right here. If you don't work it out in your head, you don't understand it. But you can understand it. The Tao that is understood is the eternal Tao. The Tao that is yammered about is not. Me talking does not make you understand it. You have to understand it by working through it in your own mind. All right, I'm going to pick out a few things that should be kind of obvious. Here we've got something in chapter 15. These are things that you might pick up on. Look, he changes the motion of their spheres. Okay, stop and think about that. What do we have? Cause and effect. We live through cause and effect. Patterns and cyclical behavior continually happens again. That's a sphere. Changing the pattern of a sphere does what? I continually act out when this happens. It always affects me this way. Why is that? I'm going to stop and look at myself and examine and heal because I've got a judgment up here that's causing me to continue to act in that way. I have to change the motion of my sphere. I have to change the reaction of my triggering. Those should be easy analogs to work out in the psyche. Of course, you have to know to treat it that way. We're not taught to do that. It's just something that's a mystery that if you go through and you start finding those common things, if you got the right brain, you start seeing things in there that, some of the stuff is easy. You see Buddha and the Jesus telling you to seek emptiness or to become poor in spirit, or karma is a reality, or the measure you mete unto others will be likewise meted unto you is the same thing as karma. It's just describing it, And you go, okay, what is going on? And the more you look into it, the more you realize it is 100% that way. You're looking at easy transitions, ones that are simple to see. The complex ones do the same thing. All right, now if we go back into, I'm going to get to 29 here. This is where Jesus entereth the 13th aeon and findeth Pistis Sophia. What the heck is that? That is so strange. What I want to do is point out a common motif that is in Jewish material. It's going to be elsewhere. This numbering pattern is elsewhere in antiquity. Where I'm going to find this in Jewish material is in Genesis. I want to read a couple of things here and then let's go look at something in Genesis. All right, chapter 29. And it came to pass then thereafter that I ascended to the vales of the 13th aeon. It came to pass when I had arrived at their vales that they drew apart of their own accord and opened themselves for me. Okay, this represents the memories that you have that you don't want to deal with. It came to pass I have arrived at their vales. That's the wall up. That's the threshold you have to cross. That they drew of their own accord and opened themselves for me. So at this point in time, we're chapter 29. At this point in time into the story, our inner memories are opening up to our consciousness and our higher awareness and our realization that we are not our memories, that we need to heal our memories. All right, let's add another layer. This stuff is so thick. This is a numbering pattern that I found in Genesis. If we go there, we can find this. I've got videos up on it, but there's a 3-7 grid, and then they're following numbers, and the numbers themselves are meaningful. Look down here where I've got first sin. What numbers do we have? 8, 11, 13, 21. Where was Pistis Sophia? She was below the 13th emanation, 13 right here. So they're following a pattern, but I want to stop and talk about something. First of all, let's interpret what's going on and then go look at something in Genesis. All right, so the idea here then is that 12 is a good thing. The disciples, all of the numbers of disciples, all of that, those are qualities that we have inside that are looking at our unresolved Pistis Sophia portion and not liking it. This is internal conflict. But Pistis Sophia needs to be healed and is at the 13th emanation or whatever the case may be. What we're looking at here is getting into that first sin phase. 3 and 7, Adam and Eve in the garden, 8, first sin. The same thing as we get to 12 and it steps into the next one, 13, it's bad. So it goes from a 12, a complete and a pure state, to 13. 13 is what happens when we need to heal. Does that make sense? It's really strange. Let's look at something in Genesis and see if we see a parallel here. Let me pull it up, and I'm going to... "13 appears twice. 12 years they served Chedorlaomer, and in the 13th year they rebelled." This is a story that's playing out in the psyche. 12 years we were pure, and in the 13th year they rebelled. What happens down here? Ishmael. Abraham was 90 years old and 9 when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. 90 and 9. What do we have in our numbers? Well, we'll get back to it. And Ishmael, his son, was 13 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. 13, circumcised. Pistis, 13 layer 13, conflict, time to heal. Circumcised, cut off the flesh of the foreskin, representing the idea that for every person, this is not a... We're not going to look at this physically. We're going to look at it like it's talked about in the Gospel of Thomas. If your father meant you to be circumcised, you would be born that way. But the true power comes in the circumcision of the spirit or the soul or something, words to that effect. I'm paraphrasing. And that's what we're looking at here. It's not worded in plain language, but you would know that the penis represents reproduction. Reproduction in the psyche is not about sex. It's about having a union that is outside of... It's like having a fight and an argument and then having something bad happen as a result. That is a result of a union, and the circumcision of the flesh is cutting that off, represents cutting that off. That's what that really means. So if you think about it, what we have is with Pistis Sophia is in a derogatory internal state at below 13, below layer 13. And in Genesis, we've got from 12 to 13. Do you see the 13 pattern right there? That there's a corruption that happens when we get to 13, and a healing needs to happen. That is a pattern that is built into not only into, well, all Jewish material, also the Roman material, the New Testament, but it comes from the Babylonians. If you look through the Enuma Elish creation myth, you'll find the patterns. That numbering pattern was in place already. All right, I entered into the 13th eon and found Pistis Sophia below the 13th eon, all alone, and no one of them with her. And she sat in that region grieving and mourning, because she had not been admitted into the 13th eon, her higher region. And she was moreover grieving because of the torments which self-willed, who is one of the three powers, had inflicted upon her. That's the consciousness has inflicted upon her through judgment. This happened, I hate it, I'm ashamed, there it is. That's the power, self-willed, inflicted on her, the inner self. We've made the choice. Right there at that moment is where we're making a choice. But this, when I shall come to speak with you respecting their expansion, I will tell you the mystery, how this befell her. That's the healing process right there. You talk it out. You talk about it, how it became about, and that's the healing that takes place. It is nested in here in what to do, but you just have to know how to read the stuff. It came to pass, when Pistis Sophia saw me shining most exceedingly with no measure for the light which was about me, that she was in great agitation and gazed at the light of my vesture. This is our inner self. Yeah, great agitation. You got that stuff you don't want to face? Guess what? You're going to have to face it. The closer you get to it, the more you think about it, the more agitated you're going to feel. That's a psychological process. She saw the mystery of her name on my vesture and the whole glory of its mystery. For formerly she was in the region of the height in the 13th aeon, but she was wont to sing praises to the higher light, which she had sent in the veil of the treasury of the light. It came to pass when she persisted in singing praises to the higher light that all the rulers who are with the two great triple powers and her invisible who is paired with her, and the other 22 invisible emanation gazed at the light, inasmuch as Pistis Sophia and her pair, they and the other 22 emanations make up 24 emanations, which the great invisible forefather and two great triple powers have emanated. Okay, this just gets thick as heck, really. It's loquacious verbosity. This is it's over the top verbiage. There's numbers all encoded in there though, and triple powers. That we're a product of our thinking, of our judgments, and paired with the other 22 emanations. This is all of the facets of us. There is much to us. We're very complex. It's not just one thing. You can't just look at yourself and say, oh, I have to feel better. Okay, I will. Nope, I have to feel better I have to resolve every freaking memory. Okay. I'm going to jump down here. And Jesus answered and said unto his disciples, it came to pass when Pistis Sophia was in the 13th eon in the region of her brethren, the invisibles, that this is the 24 emanations of the great invisible. It came to pass then by command of the first mystery that Pistis Sophia gazed into the light. She saw the light of the veil of the treasury of the light. She's looking into what? The veil of the treasury of the light. You're looking through to the purity. Oh, you're looking and seeing, I can become beyond this fear, beyond this shame, beyond this pain. But she ceased to perform the mystery of the 13th eon and sang praises to the light of the height, which she had seen in the light of the veil of the treasury of the light. So she's singing praises to the light. This is the idea that we inside are struggling. We want to heal. Our inner self wants to heal, but there's a struggle. I'm going to jump ahead. And it came to pass when the rulers of the 12 aeons were enraged against Pistis Sophia. The rulers of the 12 aeons, if you are reading Jesus, these are the 12 disciples. What do the disciples mean? Let's pull something up here. There we go. The names of the 12 disciples in orders. This is what they represent. Simon, that's a part of us that hears, obeys, understands, the rock or stone. Andrew, strong man. It's a part of our personality. James, supplants. Plants. There's two Jameses. James is the one who plants gardens, who plants crops, who puts things in the soil to grow. Metaphorically, that's what we have from our minds, our thoughts and our beliefs. Philip, powerful, lover of horses. Well, powerful. Bartholomew, son of furrowed or plowed, prepared for seed. There we have again. Okay, we want to change orbits, or do you want to grow different crops? Same thing. It's really weird, but if you think about it, it's me. Do I want to change the way that I function in life, that I cycle in life? It's done by my mind, by my thoughts. And if I want to change the crops in my garden, metaphorically, that's pulling out the thistles and planting figs. So changing the bad for the good. All of it is going to sound so different, but it's the same. Thomas, twin, doubled. Matthew, gift of God, given wholly to God. James, son of Alphaeus, supplanter, leader, chief. Thaddeus, praises or confesses, large-hearted. We're going to have to be able to confess. We're going to have to be able to find ways of purifying ourselves by admitting what's going on. Simon the Zealot, that who hears and obeys with intensity. Judas Iscariot, man of the city, is hostile, encounters, and desire for conveniences. Every one of these stories has got a group of people in there, and in that group of people, there's going to be one person that is like not quite on board. Judas Iscariot here, he's what? He's the one that gave Jesus up there. What that represents is our fears. That represents the part of us that can just readily fail. Every time you know what to do and you fail, that's because Judas Iscariot took over at that point, metaphorically. Let's just look at a few more common motifs from antiquity and call it quits on this video. It's so long, I know, that it takes a long time to really... you could just sit and interpret it and people would go, what are you talking about? There's just so much more to it than meets the eye. Okay, so What I'm going to do here is read chapter 11. What we're going to be doing is crossing a threshold. This is a part of the story that always has to happen. If it's following a pattern, you're going to cross a threshold. You're going to turn inward to the mind. That's where the story has to go. We're at chapter 11. Jesus put on his vesture. This is you. You're putting on whatever it is you need to put on to turn inward. That means connecting with the higher awareness. It came to pass, when I saw the mystery of all these words in the vesture which was sent to me, that straightway I clothed myself therewith, and I shone most exceedingly, and soared into the height. I clothed myself within, with my higher awareness. He entered the firmament. I came before the first gate of the firmament, shining most exceedingly, and there was no measure for the light which was about me. And the gates of the firmament were shaken one over against the other, and all opened at once. The powers of the firmament are amazed and fall down and adore him. Okay, he enters a first sphere, and it goes on. There's multiple spheres. There's multiple things to enter. That can be a little bit strange to understand. You would see it in Greek mythology with the Argo, the voyage of the Argo. Jason crosses a river and meets up with Pelias. He loses a shoe right there. That's crossing the first threshold right there, crossing a threshold and meeting up with Pelias, who is your early self. We can all do that. But there's a second threshold that's going through the clashing rocks, which they barely make it through. And we can all turn into our memories. How easy is it, though, to go into that bundle of memories that you want tucked away? So what we've got going on here is multiple spheres of that, too. We can turn inward. We can cross the threshold. That's that gate. That's entering in up here. Lao Tzu, darkness within darkness, the gateway to all understanding. That's right in the first page of the Tao Te Ching. Okay, what does it look like to cross the threshold in other mythologies? This one's a little complex. Like I said, they made this one really stretched out and kind of mystical. Lots of verbiage. It can be much simpler. Let's look in the Bible in the Old Testament at some earlier monomyths. Back to this one. And the fate and the sphere over which they rule. What is a fate and the sphere? The fate and sphere. This is the cycle based on what is there. This is cause and effect. And the cause and effect over which they rule, I have changed. How do we do that? We heal. We change the manner in which we hold the memory, that we judge the memory. All right, let's look at the Bible's monomyths. I'm going to point out some commonalities here. We're going to go to Ezekiel. And it came to pass in the 30th year, in the 4th month, and the 5th day of the month. Where are you? You're at the river Chebar. And the Lord came expressly to him, so the calling is happening. And he sent to him a roll of books therein, and there was written lamentations and mourning and woe. You're turning inward. What do you get? Here's what you need to know. What's your problems? The lamentations and mourning and woe. What is it that you experience? Moreover, he said, Son of man, eat this roll and go speak to the house of Israel. So I opened my mouth, and he caused me to eat that roll. Now, in order to put yourself into this story, you have to become or pretend to be the recipient of the story. That means it's going to the Israelites, and it's being taught to them at that time. So if you want to understand it, you have to pretend like you are an Israelite, and the house of Israel is your inner bunch of whatever it is, your belief system, your structure, that sort of thing. You have to put yourself into the story to that degree. If you're reading the Song of Solomon, for example, I am black and I am beautiful. How do you read that story? This is about the inner self talking to the outer self. You pretend like you're the audience. You have to do that in order to really access the story. Pretend you're the audience that story was written for. Put yourself in their shoes. Then I did eat it, and it was in my mouth as honey for sweetness. Joshua. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, it came to pass that the Lord spoke unto Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses. So God returns at this point in time. We would see that. This is like the beginning of Noah. God returns. It's been gone that whole time, and God returns. We don't see the beginning of the story, just the hero portion. We got the River Jordan. What did we have up here? The River Chebar. Down here we got the River Jordan. We had a gate in the Pistis of Sophia. Go over the River Jordan, crossing the threshold. And what do we have? This book of the law shall not depart out of your mouth, but you shall meditate therein day and night, and that you may observe to do according to all that is written therein, for then you shall make your way prosperous, and then you shall have good success. What did it say up here? Son of man, eat this roll, and go speak to the house of Israel. And I opened my mouth, and he caused me to eat that roll. The book of the law shall not depart out of your mouth. Exodus, what do we have? God calls him out of the midst of the bush and says, here I am. And he gives him his supernatural aid. He denies the call. They cross the Red Sea. The crossing of the threshold is there. And he gives him what? The 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments. So we see common teachings in there, and we see that with the Pistis of Sophia, the one as well, don't we? We see the numbering pattern. We see some Jewish examples of things going on there. There's a threshold to be crossed, but it's not a river in this case. Jesus has threshold to be crossed. God appears to him, this is my son whom I am well pleased, right at the moment of the baptism. He's crossing a threshold there. There's a crossing of a threshold when he goes into the tomb for the crucifixion. Entering into the tomb, having the door shut, that's turning inward and coming out purified. So those are all crossing of the thresholds that we can see in the stories. Okay, Pistis of Sophia, I'll put it at that. Do you want me to do one where I get more in detail into trying to interpret it? It is very foreign stuff to me because I haven't studied a lot of Gnostic material. I can see they're using the same patterns. However, and through the verbiage, you can see that it's common verbiage and common teachings. And if you read enough stuff, you'll see that this stuff is from all over the place. It's not new. It's just assembled in a new way and kind of given a new flavor to it. All right. Questions, comments? I better end this video. It got long. See you in the next one. Take care.